Okay, this is kind of a response video to a video by Anthony Baer, where he claims that the Nile River cannot possibly exist on a globe. So, which is then an argument for that the Earth must be flat. To kind of understand the argument, let's assume the Nile is straight. The Nile kind of curves around, but we'll just assume it's a straight line going from Lake Victoria to the Nile Delta, which is easier to draw. So because now we can cut the Earth here, which would look somewhat like this. And now we could have a look at this section of the Nile, which starts at Lake Victoria and ends at the Nile Delta. And then Anthony's argument is, if we just take a straight line from the Nile Delta to Lake Victoria, then basically we get a bump here in the middle. And now Anthony argues that as gravitational force always goes down, the water cannot possibly come over this bump. So this is what Anthony proposes would be the gravitational force at this point, Lake Victoria. And he argues gravitational force does not go sideways. So there's no way how the water can come from here, from Lake Victoria, up to this bump. Now, this is living under a strange assumption that this gravitational force here basically always goes down, and this assumption, a ball here at Lake Victoria would roll off the Earth, which is something flat Earth theorists kind of seem problems to understand. The real gravitational force would actually look something like this, okay? Because assuming a globe, so a Earth with a circular intersection, what we mean by the gravitational force goes down is not in fact it always goes into one direction, but what we actually mean by this is that the gravitational force always goes towards the center of the Earth, the mass center of the Earth. So if we change the point on the Earth where we are sitting, the direction of the gravitational force actually changes, rather than what Anthony proposes, which always goes into one direction, which is down. Now actually we can this actual gravitational force can be split into a component that goes into Anthony's directions and a sideways component, which would look somewhat like this. So if we were to sit on top of this bump, we see the gravitational force is in fact the same thing as Anthony proposes. But as we go away from this bump, the component of the actual gravitational force that goes into Anthony's direction decreases, while we get a sideways component which directs us to this bump. Okay, and if we go far enough, down here, in fact, the actual gravitational force does not at all go in Anthony's direction, but it goes sideways. And if we go further down, the actual gravitational force now has a component that goes into the opposite direction of Anthony's force, so it goes upwards in this sense. So if we interpret the coordinate system differently, like this, down would always mean the same direction, yeah, towards the center. But if we interpret it the same way Anthony is interpreting it, down will actually depend on where you're sitting on Earth. So in fact, this model is not wrong. Yeah, it is not wrong to define down as always going downwards, but then the assumption that gravitation always goes down is wrong, because now gravitation can go sidewards, and thus water can go from here, Lake Victoria, onto this bump, because we have this piece of sideward force. Now, why does then not everything move towards this bump? Now, if we take this this sphere, the actual gravitational force points perpendicular to the surface, so we have no movement. But now if we just lift up the point at Lake Victoria a tiny little bit, then suddenly we can get movement in this direction. And this is how the Nile can work on a sphere.